Welcome to the Pop Docs Podcast. My name is Joseph. I'm a doctor in degree only.
And I'm Deni, and I'm a doctor in name only, and we're diagnosing the state of pop culture.
We are the Pop Docs, and our clinic is now open. Welcome, listeners. This is our inaugural episode for our podcast, the aforementioned The Pop Docs. And we're going to get into here in a few moments, as many first episodes of podcasts do, more in-depth descriptive introductions where we'll actually explain the genesis of the name of our podcast and our taglines there at the outset. But before we do, Deni, my dear sister, do you have any specialty beverages or snacks that you brought to the podcast today?
No snacks, although next time I'll plan on bringing some. But I was enjoying a glass of delicious Kim Crawford Prosecco, which happens to be one of my favorites.
You were enjoying it, so does that mean that it has now been exhausted before we've even started? Or are we in the process?
Just, I'm pacing myself. Pacing. It's first pilot episode. Trying to be in the now and not get too Prosecco-y.
Fair enough. I have been known to have a few beverages in my day. Unfortunately, I don't have any specialty beverage with me today, but I have a specialty glass that I brought for our inaugural episode. My Green Dragon Inn mug, all the way from Hobbiton. You were there when I purchased this lovely piece of memorabilia. So even though there's only water in it, it at least sticks with our motif. And I would highly recommend, if you have the time and resources, definitely go to Hobbiton, check it out, get your own mug. It is wonderful. And
it's life-changing.
Yes. And this mug, I don't even know how many years ago it was now, at least 5? I want to say probably more than 5.
More than 5. It was in 2016.
Whew. And this thing has held up since then and has traveled literally across the world. And so it's also well manufactured. Okay, enough with the plugs for the Green Dragon Inn, for Hobbiton, for New Zealand, all of that. And finish burying the lead here. Let's jump in and introduce ourselves to our listeners in greater detail, just kind of giving some background into one, as I mentioned, why we have the show named the way we do in our taglines, why people and listeners might be interested in hearing what we have to say about popular culture generally, and ultimately how we got into our fandoms that we're going to be discussing, hopefully on a weekly basis or close to a weekly basis on this particular podcast. So, Deni, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Okay, let's do it. So, hey guys, my name is Deni Ricci. My initials are DR, which is where I get the doctor in name only, because it's literally just my initials. I do not have a PhD. I do not have any kind of doctoral degree, but I just go by my initials. And also, I have a wonderful boss who kind of dubbed me the doctor. And I'm pretty sure that was mostly just from my love of Doctor Who, but also because my initials are DR. So, the doctor. But yes, my name is Deni. It's wonderful to speak with all of you. A little bit of background on me. Live in Orlando, Florida, home of the mouse and Universal, home of theme parks, basically. But I have a wonderful
Orlando Eye.
The Orlando Eye. I have a wonderful husband and a beautiful daughter who just turned 4. And so just kind of living my best life here in Orlando, and just a little bit of background on where my love for fantasy and all things fandom kind of came from. It started so long ago, but it took the form of probably books first, but then really obviously movies and television. And then what came a little bit later, where PC games came in there at some point. But, in terms of books, it really I liked weird books to begin with when I was young. One of my favorite books was The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Odd Tales, which is a very strange book, but awesome. Great
one you just found for your own daughter, I believe.
Yes, I did. I bought it for her. Same author did The Three Little Pigs. And the artwork is just so cool, and the stories. But it kind of stemmed from that. But then from there, obviously, going into like chapter books, read all kinds of, Goosebumps was a huge influence, which I know you'll probably touch on too, Joe. But Goosebumps was huge. Sideways Stories, which were weird stories about a school, kind of funky and weird. Scary Stories, of course. Like I grew up with, that's my horror side really started young, and I'm not really sure where I got that from, but I just gravitated to darker side of things. With like Nickelodeon in terms of like Are You Afraid of the Dark was one of my favorite shows. And then, you know, it kind of also branched into PC games at some point, like EverQuest, which I don't know if you can see, but I have an EverQuest map behind me. I loved playing EverQuest.
And somewhere you have an Ixar figurine.
I do.
A foot tall, a foot and a half tall.
Yeah, it's pretty tall, and I still have it after all these years. Probably a collector item by now. But yeah, I have that. I mean, some of the stuff. I saw Pokemon cards on Antique Roadshow the other day, and it killed me inside because I was like, we can't be that old.
Was one a foil Charizard?
Probably. It was like the sleeves of the old, you know, like all the old Pokemon cards. I was like, man, that can't be that old yet. Come on.
This is completely unrelated, but I saw, I think on Twitter somewhere, a video of two people playing the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, but they had actually manufactured the arm braces things, and they were using that to play. It was very ingenious, but also bringing me back to our youth a little bit. In terms of trading card games. Yeah,
the trading card games and the tournaments we used to go to, the Pokemon tournaments. I didn't really participate, but you did. And that was fun. That was cool. So all of that. Yeah, all of that basically just bundled into one. And then, you know, the fandoms just, I love a little bit of anything and everything. Star Wars, Marvel, Doctor Who, as I mentioned, Lord of the Rings, of course, you know, just a little bit of anything and everything. I love it all, basically. But what about you, Joe? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you well know, my trajectory was somewhat similar in the sense that my fandoms certainly began with the written word and books. And I remember one of my earlier memories, particularly in terms of becoming an avid reader and an avid reader of sci-fi, fantasy, and related genres, was a summer reading program in Algonquin, Illinois, where we used to live at the local library, where you had to read a certain number of titles over the summer, and you got escalating prizes, starting with like stickers and candy and pencils and all this stuff. And so there was a self-interest in becoming a reader, but I really gravitated toward a collection of books in the sci-fi fantasy field, particularly Animorphs was one of the mainstays of my readership at that age. You mentioned Goosebumps, loved Goosebumps, both of which were ultimately turned into adaptations of varying degrees of quality on Nickelodeon, I believe, for both of them. With Goosebumps, I thought being a great adaptation of several of those stories, and the Animorphs one lacking in many different respects in quality. But moving beyond that, one of the earlier novels I recall reading was Jurassic Park. Loved Jurassic Park, even though it was quite a bit different than the movie. And the movie really took a different turn in its adaptation, but both are great. But certainly, as kind of can be seen over my shoulder here, I fell in love with The Wheel of Time in particular. And that was really my entry point into epic fantasy and remains my favorite book series of all time, certainly my favorite fantasy book series of all time. But I've moved certainly beyond The Wheel of Time. I read stuff from Brandon Sanderson, The Cosmere, read a whole host of other epic fantasies, fantasy-related books, sci-fi series, and the like. And so still very much an avid reader, as I know you are, Deni. But certainly love all the different types of fantasy sci-fi television series. It's been kind of a golden age, I think, particularly in the rise of streaming for the production and creation of fantasy sci-fi television series, broadly defined, as well as movies. And so certainly my fandom is fairly broad, just as yours is, as you described yours as being. I can't remember if you had mentioned, but we also become avid convention goers. So certainly here in Orlando, we have MegaCon. MegaCon was actually just a month or so ago. Great experience. We've been to Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con a few times. You and your husband are preparing to go back here in a couple months, which is super exciting.
Yeah, we are.
And so with this experience, this history, with this shared interest that we have, we've been talking about these things, debating these things, discussing issues of popular culture and fandoms, have had shared experiences in going to conventions, going on trips to like Hobbiton and the like. And so we just decided recently, let's just start recording them and see if anyone's interested in hearing our takes on all these different areas, all these different mediums, all these different IPs, to use kind of the clinical language for a lot of this these days. And so I think that's kind of certainly the genesis. That's the intent of our podcast, the Pop Docs, to just have these conversations between siblings and see if anyone else wants to listen in, potentially participate through comments and questions in the different forums where these are going to be uploaded. I think we have a lot of really fun ideas and ways to talk through these different fandoms, these different mediums and whatnot, in terms of both kind of come up with fun games, but also different segments, some of which you'll see in this episode. And so with that, anything else before we jump into the first of our segments, Deni?
I don't think so. I think I'm ready to jump. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Our first segment is called Bleep We Found on the Internet. And I say bleep because I don't want to be kicked off of any platforms for using inappropriate language. So depending on the platforms where we find to upload this and their arrangements, their rules, maybe we'll actually substitute the word that we want to substitute.
You can fill in the blank yourselves for that.
Yeah. So with that, this is a simple segment where during the week, Deni and I find something on the internet we find interesting, disturbing, crazy, wild, that we want to get the other's opinion on. Hopefully that ours will not align. They will not overlap. We do not share these with each other in advance of the episode. So hopefully we are each hearing this for the first time and reacting live, real time, to these stories, to the bleep we found on the internet. Deni, do you want to go first, or would you like me to give you my story first?
Why don't you go first, since you hyped up yours? So now I just really want to hear it.
Excellent. Yes. And even though I have not told Deni what I have found, I have been dropping hints. I think this is fascinating, and I think she's going to love this. So let me see if you can guess what this is, or maybe this will just give away that we actually did come up with the same thing. I'm going to give you a couple words and phrases, and let's see if you can narrow it down. First word is clown. Do you have any idea? Clown.
Okay.
Yes. Very much a circus clown.
It's stewing in my brain. Okay. I got clown. I'm narrowing it down to
vehicle.
To options. Vehicle. Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. Can I throw it out there?
Throw it out there.
Twisted metal.
Yes.
Yes.
You must. You
must be one of mine. It was on the list.
I knew it. I knew it. I saw it yesterday. I assume it's because CinemaCon is going on right now, and that this was the drop they had. It's going to be debuting, I believe, on Peacock on July 27th. So Let me give you a little background. You clearly know about it already, but this is starring Anthony Mackie, Stephanie Beatriz, Will Arnett, Nev Campbell, and more. I'm getting this information, by the way, from Collider.com.
Love it.
We go down here. Importantly, though, I don't know if did you read up on the synopsis and the gist of it?
So I did not. I was going to say that the thing was, so I took a break from Twitter, listeners, and Twitter is where I used to get all of my news. And so since I took a break, I wasn't getting like all of my updates and stuff, but I recently hopped back on, mostly for San Diego Comic-Con updates, to be quite honest. But have since then obviously been keeping up to date on all the announcements, especially from CinemaCon. And I saw the Twisted Metal thing pass on my feed, and I didn't even know they were creating a show off of it. So when it was like the most delightful surprise I have ever received, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And the teaser is amazing. I love it so much. It's so good.
So you saw the teaser trailer that came out today?
I saw the teaser trailer that came out today, yes. But I haven't read anything about it because I literally just saw it today, which today is April 28th, in case people are wondering.
So we still got a couple months before it officially debuts on Peacock. But
yes.
I think one of the important things is, and this is probably necessary, kind of step back, we should mention we played the heck out of Twisted Metal games. PlayStation was one of the consoles that we had when we were growing up. I forget which one specifically that we have. Was it 2?
I know. Twisted Metal 2. Mm-hmm.
And we played that constantly.
Yep.
And so we are huge Twisted Metal fans going way back. And I think you'd mentioned, like you, I had no idea this was being adapted until I saw the teaser poster yesterday, the teaser trailer today, both of which are very much teasers. But there apparently was a synopsis released, and this is a unique and original story, which presumably is necessary because from my recollection of playing the game, to the extent there was a narrative, it was kind of like Mortal Kombat, where each individual character had a specific ending if they prevailed and won a tournament, but they were always kind of bonkers and out there, and not probably the greatest basis for some kind of narrative story. So this is apparently a new, unique, original story. And the synopsis, again from Collider.com, says the show is going to follow a motor-mouthed outsider who is offered a chance at a better life, but only if he can successfully deliver a mysterious package across a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And obviously, Sweet Tooth is in it. We saw Sweet Tooth briefly. Yeah, in the both the poster, well, I saw his vehicle in the poster, and then I actually saw him, the character, in the teaser trailer. So you're obviously excited.
I'm so excited. I mean, yeah, like you said, we used to play that game like all the time, Twisted Metal 2 specifically, and yeah, like every single character I would play. I'm curious if you had a favorite character that you played. Mine was, ironically, Mr. Grimm, which was like the easiest to die. He was like motor, but he had one of the most badass like weapons that could kill you in like one hit.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, but he rode the motorcycle.
Yeah,
and he was like the skeleton.
The sidecar too?
Yeah, the little sidecar. And then when he'd get like toasted, you know, he's like getting like damage. It's like all just like wonky. But his special like weapon was badass. Like it would like annihilate you in one hit. But he was my favorite to play, Mr. Grimm.
I honestly don't remember too many of the characters, but the one that sticks out in memory was Warthog, only because I think I found the most success with Warthog.
Yeah, the tank, but the Hummer tank guy.
Yeah. But I mean, how can you not appreciate Axel? Because it was the most absurd design and the most ridiculous thing that you could ever imagine, being in a post-apocalyptic tournament of vehicles trying to blow each other up.
Right.
So like just his character design, his vehicle design, if you can call it a vehicle, certainly lives in my memory as being like integral to Twisted Metal, or at least so linked to the IP of Twisted Metal. I also remember, that more specifically than like characters or vehicles, I remember the environments. So one was Paris and like all the secret tunnels and stuff that you could utilize. But the one that really sticks out was the one that took place on the skyscrapers.
Yes, and that one was cool.
I remember sometimes I think there was a boss fight where it was like a giant tank. And it would just ram you over and over again. And that one was awful on that particular map because it would just ram you over the side of the skyscrapers. Because for whatever reason, you're battling at the top of these skyscrapers. So for me, it was more so the environments that I recall than necessarily the characters. But I just love the game. And so I'm excited to see what this show's about. I think it's going to be bonkers, and it needs to be bonkers. I think they need to be...
Oh, it definitely has to be bonkers.
It seems like they realize this is going to be crazy. It needs to be fun, comedic, and that they need to recognize that it's crazy, comedic, and let's lean into that. Be self-aware about it. It looks like they are. And so I have high hopes this is going to be a very enjoyable, very entertaining show.
Yeah, I have high hopes for it too. Even with like I'm completely forgetting the song that he played, but like he popped in the CD, which by the way, CD sunshine. In a car. Yeah, Steal My Sunshine. CD in a car, Steal My Sunshine. And it's just like all chipper as he's going in, like machine guns blaring. I was like, oh, this is great. I was like, this is going to be so good.
Well, there's no one in front of him, so he's just rattling off the guns for no reason. But you know what?
But of course, that's what you do in Twisted Metal. You're just like Twisted Metal. Machine gun blazing because they don't cost any ammo. So you're just like, toss damage while I can.
So I have to admit, that has been the highlight of what's come out of CinemaCon for me, just because I think it was so unexpected, even though it was fairly minimal. But yeah, so that was my piece of bleep I found on the internet, but it's also bleep that you found on the internet. So with that, what do you have for me? Hopefully something I did not see so I can react with surprise, shock.
Well, Twisted Metal was going to be mine because I was shocked by it. And I was like, this is so cool. And obviously nostalgic for us, going back to playing the game and everything. So I thought that was pretty cool. But let's see, what else did I have? I mean, I have I'm just like really hyped for all the announcements that have come out, like the Doctor Who one. I know you're not as into Doctor Who as me, but just the new Doctor, and the new villain who's coming out. Like, that's just so exciting.
I thought David Tennant was back. What do you mean, new Doctor?
Well, that's part of the special. That's coming out. Yes, which is exciting too. I could, David Tennant can come back anytime he wants. Like that's fine. But that's really exciting. The news about Murder in the Building season 3 production wrapping. So that's going to go into post now. So that's exciting.
And there was a teaser for that not that long ago that was wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So that's really cool. House of the Dragon season 2 is in production. Dune Part 2. They released first look photos and Vanity Fair and the new characters. Oh, I know you're not a big fan, but I loved the first one. And so I'm really excited. Plus, Florence Pugh, Joe, she's in the second one.
I think the first one might still be going on. It's so long and dry. And if I have to see Timothée Chalamet mope about some austere stone hallway again, might lose it.
But he's so beautiful while he does it.
Oh,
and the cinematography is gorgeous. I don't know. I love it.
It was okay.
It spoke to my science fiction brain. Like I loved that side of it. Plus, I mean, it blew the original Dune out of the water. So
well, I was just from what I hear, that's not a high bar. I will say, Stellan Skarsgård was wonderful, but then again, Stellan Skarsgård is wonderful in pretty much everything he does. So that's
true.
Pretty low bar to me.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it has a great cast, and the second one alone, like the cast that they have for that is incredible. With obviously, I mentioned Florence Pugh, but then Austin Butler is going to be in it. They didn't even reveal his full character, but he's supposedly playing
the guy that played Elvis, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is he still using his Elvis voice in Dune 2? I heard that.
No, I don't think so.
Character.
Maybe.
He's so method that he's still Elvis even after the film is wrapped.
Well, he's playing, what did they call him? A sociopath / kind of like Mick Jagger. Is how they described him. And I was like, all right, well, that's a take.
Was he the one that, was there a rocker? I don't think it was David Bowie, but in the other one, the previous one that everyone kind of pans. I'll have to look it up. I could have sworn there was some kind of rocker that played some far out character in the last one. I can't remember. Was the last one a movie or a set of movies, or was it a TV movie? Do you recall?
It was a movie. No, it was a movie.
Who is?
Gotta look that up.
Rocker,
I was like, rocker. Which one?
Dune.
I mean,
I could have sworn they were in like a like one of the pictures. They're in like a steel or iron speedo or something like that. No, this is ringing a bell.
You mean the original? Yeah. Okay, sorry. My brain automatically.
Not Denis Villeneuve's.
My name.
That's too self-serious.
I immediately go to the good one.
Hey, camp can be good sometimes.
I mean, camp can be, but I just did not enjoy it. I mean, the original had a great cast. It had Patrick Stewart in it. It had Kyle.
Patrick Stewart was in the original?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh.
At least that's what I'm reading right now. I don't remember that either, which clearly shows how long it's been since I even gave it a try. But it had Patrick Stewart. It had I'm probably going to butcher his last name. Which
Sting. It was Sting. Sting was in the original Dune.
1984.
Who did he play? He played. I am going to butcher this. Fade Rautha Harkonnen. Is that a meaningful name to you?
Not off the top of my head, but
is that who Austin Butler is playing?
I don't think so.
Let me see. Let me look up. Who is Austin Butler playing in Dune? Could it be that he's been typecasted as playing only weird rockers in movies? Dune 2 finally reveals first look at the villain. Yes, he is. He's playing the same one.
Oh my god! So he is literally playing.
There you go.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, making his way through old rockers and music men. I don't know. I don't know if Elvis and Sting are in the same category of music. That's kind
That
of where
explain
the boundaries of my popular culture knowledge usually ends right when we get into music.
that explains the description of a sociopath plus Mick Jagger reference that they described him as, because I was like, what?
Not that you're calling Elvis or Sting a sociopath, I hope.
No, I'm not. But I was just kind of like, huh, okay.
That's way too much time to spend on
against
Dune. Let's move on from Dune. I can't handle any more Dune. Oh,
okay,
God.
okay. We can trim it down in post.
But I still experience that whole conversation, so I can't edit my memory of that.
Okay, so the only other thing that I had, which was kind of funny to me, speaking of San Diego Comic-Con coming up soon, is that announcements are starting to roll out about, like special guests attending, the different production studios, movie studios, what have you, who are attending, which includes like parties or vendors that are coming as well. And one of the ones that stood out to me, because I thought this was hilarious and taps into childhood, I guess. Do you remember Neopets?
Yeah.
Okay. So Neopets is apparently making a comeback and is coming to San Diego Comic-Con.
Correct me. Those are the keychain animals, right?
No.
Those are like handheld.
Those are Tamagotchis.
Or Digimon, which are way better.
Or Digimons, yeah.
With a cool television show component.
Yeah. No,
so what were Neopets then?
Neopets was like an online game. It was like an online game that you went to. I played it a lot. You probably did not.
The name rings a bell. I mean, the name sounds very familiar, but clearly I don't remember the actual Neopets themselves.
Yeah, it like in 2019, it got like a kind of a revival, I guess you could say. It got a TV show, and then but it was like an old game, website game. Really, you went to a website and you played it through that, and you had to log on, and you had like a Neopet, and they're like cute little animal characters, like a dinosaur or a penguin or a cat or something. But they're really cute. They're called Neopets, and you would take care of it, kind of like a Tamagotchi, but online, so you'd have to log in. But one of the big things was like every day you could go up and you can take a piece of a giant omelet. Mm-hmm.
What?
That's a thing. And so it was really fun. And
so they're is this website coming back? Is that what's happening at Comic-Con? Are they making another show about it?
So I think it's just the show, and TNT's bringing it with them to Comic-Con, and they're doing an after party with Neopets.
Are you going? Did you get tickets?
I may go because
oh my gosh,
people who played Neopets back in the day would know that if they serve omelet, they have to serve an omelet during it because it's literally about taking slices of omelets and taking care of digital pets. It's amazing.
This just sounds like a more exotic Farmville.
Kind of. It's probably the OG Farmville, basically. Mm-hmm.
So Zuckerberg ripped that off.
Maybe a little bit, yeah. Because you would like take care of your pet. You do like activities and challenges and stuff like with them, and you could buy things and stuff like that. So it was fun. You could battle them. I think I'm pretty sure you could battle them at one point.
You sound excited about this, so I'm happy that you're excited about.
I'm
Neopets
so excited about it. I couldn't remember if you remember me playing that at all or not, but yeah, it was a thing.
I remember myself playing with Digimon. I remember Digimon; those were cool.
Mm-hmm.
And those could battle.
Digimon was cool.
Digital monsters. Digimons are the champions.
Digital monsters. Digimons are the champions.
I think you just got us copyright.
It was a parody. It's okay. It's a parody. It's fine.
Now bring back Digimon. Now that's something that should be brought back. TNT, get on Digimon. Come on.
Yeah, not sure how the Neopets made a revival, but it is what it is, and I'm here for it. So that was kind of my news because that's taking it back.
All right. So would you rather have at Comic-Con, if you had the choice, this Neopet revival and being able to go to this party and have an omelet, or still have Conan O'Brien's show?
Oh my god!
And being able to attend Conan O'Brien's show.
No competition. Conan O'Brien, of course. I love him. I love him so much. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he will. He still has his podcast. He could do like a live podcast recording. I'd go to that for sure. I'm still. So, listeners, I'm a huge Conan O'Brien fan. Love him so much. His humor is my humor, and he's my favorite. If you're watching, I have my little Conan O'Brien Funko Pop.
And how did you get that Funko?
And several of them. My dear husband got him for me because somehow, I don't know how this happened in this universe. My husband Rob got to attend a Conan O'Brien taping at San Diego Comic-Con, but I couldn't fly out in time due to work, so I had to miss it, which I was really bummed about because he did a whole It Chapter 2 recording during it, which was also I was very jealous about.
And all you got was that Funko Pop.
All I got was this Funko Pop.
I remember
and a picture.
Oh, there you go, but not with you in it.
Not with me in it, but Rob took a picture of the stage and everything.
It's okay. You have pictures with his small little display at Universal Studios in the Tonight Show.
I do.
Right. So there you go.
I do.
A consolation gift. I also remember there being one Comic-Con where we were hunting down one of the pop-ups where they were throwing out Funko Pops for his show.
We were.
Walked around San Diego for like an hour and saw no sign.
Nope.
So, no happy ending to that story in terms of us actually obtaining the goal of getting a Conan Funko Pop. But the universe righted itself by giving Rob the opportunity to go to his show in your place.
Yes.
So, any other news? I guess that brings us back to the segment. Somehow we're on Conan O'Brien and his podcast instead of our own podcast here.
No, I think that that covers it. I mean, there was so much more that was announced recently. New Harry Potter show, new Twilight show, new basically any revival show that you could possibly think of, they're doing right now. So, we'll just have to wait and see how it all pans out.
Yeah. And maybe there'll be topics down the road for one of our other episodes because we're not regularly running out of time, but we have another segment to get to, a couple other segments to get to. And so we should probably get to them. And so this has been Bleep we found on the internet. So with that, Deni, let's move into our ranking segment. And so this is a general segment where we come up with various ideas, various topics, various issues, and we rank them. And so today, in keeping with the inaugural nature of our episode, we are ranking pilots. And so with that, Deni, do we have any guidelines? Do we have any rules? How are we going about this? How did we decide our rankings for pilots?
I mean, I don't know if I really had any solid guidelines that I was kind of hooking into. I mean, the things that I kind of looked at in terms of what made a pilot was first and foremost, probably the top two would be story, world setting. So what the world.
So these are not airline pilots. These are not airline pilots. Oh, crap. No, I'm kidding. I should have mentioned these are pilot episodes and pilots in the entertainment industry, not like pilots that fly planes.
Wow. You went over my head there for a second, but okay.
I had Spirit and Frontier on my worst list. But
I mean, yes, I agree with that. Spirit and Frontier, worse for sure. Delta's up there on top, and Alaska Airlines, shout out.
For best, you mean?
Yes, for best. Okay, those are the best.
So Delta
Delta, best. Spirit, Frontier, I agree, worse.
All right, so they may still sponsor us one day because you put them on the best list.
Maybe
Spirit and Frontier out the window, but that's okay because we won't want to fly on them anyway. So
everyone would agree with us, so it's fine.
Sorry, I diverted you from talking about your criteria.
Okay, so criteria, really, really quick. The things that I kind of focus on was world setting, so really establishing the world that the show would live in. And then probably, obviously, characters, introducing them really well, introducing them in terms of personality, dialogue, relationships off the bat, just obviously full character development. Because I think that's really hard to do in one episode. But there are ones who did it fantastically. So those are the top two. Obviously, throw in Writing, of course, makes a huge, obviously, difference in television. But writing, those are kind of like the main things that I kind of focused on.
All right.
For pilots. So what about you? What did you focus on?
Similar criteria. For kind of just generally, did it make me care about the characters? Do I remember the names of the characters after I've watched the pilot episode?
Yep.
That's kind of important for me. Am I certainly interested in seeing more of this? Do I want to turn on the next episode? And so, alongside everything you mentioned, the technical aspects, particularly if this is like fantasy or sci-fi where world building is very important, that we have to buy the world as a character as well as the actual individuals in the series. And so those would be the only kind of addendums I would add to that, to the extent that they weren't explicit in the criteria you laid out. Is, do I care about these people? Do I care about the stakes? Are there stakes? That would be nice to have as well. And is there a mystery? Is there a storyline that's sort of set up that is going to captivate me enough to have me watch the next one and then hopefully watch the remainders of the seasons? And so, so similar criteria, although no hard and fast rules, certainly. So certainly with anything in popular culture, it's going to be really personal preference. There's undoubtedly going to be subjective elements to these dynamics, but I imagine there might be some overlap in both of our best and worst lists here. So we've done our top 3 because in the past we extended it beyond that to top 5, and we spent far too much time between the two of us just discussing both of our top 5 lists,
about like 2 hours
too. So there was mission creep set in, and we ended up having these lists that were ridiculously long. And so we've limited ourselves to talking about the top 3. We'll start with the worst and end with the best, and on a high note and on an optimistic note. So Deni, do you want to lead us off with your number 3 on your worst list? And then I'll give my number 3 and we'll go back and forth.
Okay. Number 3 on my worst list. And this is primarily driven because of the hype behind it, and the expectations were so high for it that it made the list, unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately, because I feel strongly about this, and I'm sure you do. My number 3 was Rings of Power.
Go on. Spill.
I mean, basically,
why.
For the reasons of why I said the hype and the expectation for it coming off of, this was the first off of the Hobbit trilogy, but then obviously the Peter Jackson trilogy as well. And so the hype was driven so high for it, with Amazon spearheading it. And I actually went to the Hall H panel for it at San Diego Comic-Con last year, and it was incredible what they did, and hearing from the cast and the showrunners, Stephen Colbert, like it was just hype central. And so when
that was your first Hall H experience, right?
That was my first Hall H experience. Yes, we actually went through the process of waiting in line for that.
How long did it take, roughly, if you had to estimate?
Oh, like days. But there's a way to do it. People find groups of people, and you'll make it happen. But
don't spill trade secrets.
It's not trade secrets. You can look it up nowadays. But anyways, super hyped for it. Was really looking forward to it, and then it aired, and it just plummeted down. Look, I get it. The visuals were gorgeous. They spent all their money in visual effects, and it looked beautiful. However, everything else just lacked. The writing wasn't great. It sounded, a lot of it was super cheesy, fantasy lines that you would expect. Some costumes looked great. Don't get me wrong, but come on, man, you were coming off of the top tier of what fantasy elves and dwarves can look like, and you gave us those elf ears? That's what you gave us? It's just so heartbreaking to see certain things that I don't know.
Bigger ear budget.
Bigger elf ear budget or something. But yeah, it was just the dialogue wasn't great, the story wasn't great. We had this powerhouse character, Galadriel, who, in the books and in the original trilogy, were so well done and kind of mysterious. So this was really an opportunity to branch out on her character. And I felt like they just pushed too hard in one direction of like warrior, elf princess, and not like enough actual development into who her character was, I guess you could say. So I don't know. It was a lot of just being left wanting, I guess.
Yeah, and I can completely understand that. It would certainly be on my worst list. It did not crack the top 3. But I'm right there with you on all those dimensions. I actually, though, thought it didn't look that great. I thought, for me, it felt like it was made in a computer. A lot of it felt very CGI heavy.
Sure.
And I mean, the nice thing about it was at least they did give you different feels for different environments. It wasn't all the same kind of environment. But and none of the characters were very interesting. And they didn't, in my opinion, didn't get much interesting throughout the rest of the season. Now, maybe they can turn it around in the second season. But yeah, it was not an interesting pilot. It was, at times I thought it was actually quite boring. Kind of move forward, move the plot forward here. Tell me I guess first of all, tell me what the plot is, and then move it forward. And so but I certainly, as you know, have an ulterior reason, ulterior motive, a self-interested reason to actually dislike Rings of Power beyond just the presentation of the show, and that I think, and I'm convinced that it has led to Wheel Time continually being postponed, even though JordanCon was recently was held, and there was some announcements made, particularly casting announcements made. We still don't have a release date for season 2, and I'm convinced part of that is because of Rings of Power. And so even before Rings of Power aired, I was already predisposed against it, and so I fully admit to bias outside of the realm of storytelling and presentation for Rings of Power. But nevertheless, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It was not a great pilot, and generally not a great first season. But this is a great segue, because my number 3, as much as it pains me to say, is Wheel of Time. I thought the Wheel of Time pilot was not great. I thought the opening where Moraine is monologuing, setting up the story, kind of setting up the world, certainly setting up her mission. That felt like a video game cutscene to me. It felt really cheap. And I think it's probably better than doing what a lot of the fantasy shows do, is either like a crawl or text that just fades in and then fades out. But it felt cheap. And then the other cold open with the Red Sisters chasing down the man who could channel also kind of felt like a video game cutscene. But then, even though there were cool moments in the pilot, like certainly the battle at the end was really cool, really well done. Yeah. It felt very disjointed, particularly in contrast to like the rest of the show. And then the way they left, again, spoilers abound in our podcast. I don't think we're going to have any limitation on spoilers, so be prepared. And I'm terrible at moderating myself on spoilers, so apologies far in advance. But the way they left too, where Moraine just says, "One of you is the Dragon Reborn," and this is supposed to be some person of legend, person of prophecy that's also potentially going to break the world. And they're all, except for I think Perrin, have parents, and and Moraine says, "You got to come with me. You got to get the heck out of here." And all the parents are like, "Okay, peace, good luck." And none of the kids say anything. They just get on horses and leave. And I saw one of my favorite Wheel of Time podcasts, Talk Ron Riat, shout out, love that podcast. They were talking about it felt like, they characterized it that they felt like the show had to end at a certain time, and so they didn't have time to actually give any reasons as to why they were leaving or any kind of drama to it. And so they said, "Oh, the episode's about to end, get on horses and leave." And so all of this combined, I thought it was not a great first episode. It was not a great pilot. I liked the season generally, although like Rings of Power, I thought it left much to be desired and did not live up to its cachet and its status in kind of the fantasy book community. And so they got a lot to do in the second season, which I think they're going to be able to do, because certainly were plagued by COVID issues and
Sure.
issues with some of their actors. So there's some, I think, reasons, excuses to give them. But yeah, it was disappointing.
Yeah.
But especially considering how long I and others have waited for an adaptation of The Wheel of Time. So on one hand, I'm like super excited that they actually did it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet now I still am complaining. So
yeah. I guess
one of the we do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, really quick, just one of the positives that I took I love the cast. I thought the cast was great.
They're good. They're good.
The casting was good, so that made me excited for it. At least the characters seemed to come through pretty well. So, which can be challenging with such a big ensemble that they all came through pretty solid. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's a good point. So, what's number 2 on your list?
Number 2, which is one that you won't relate to whatsoever, but it's again like all mine are also very passion driven. So
the whole preamble at the first part of the segment. Not
well,
really,
also, I mean, I feel like they still apply though, because I feel like they still apply. Is that my second one is the Vampire Diaries. I love the show as a whole, but you look back at the pilot, and the pilot A was shot in a completely different location. I get it, budget. It was cheaper to shoot up in Canada. I get it. But pilot, the locations are completely different. You have every vampire cliche that you could possibly have in there in terms of writing and dialogue, and vampire romanticism with like in high school, so typical.
But then for someone that loves Buffy the Vampire,
and I love Buffy, I love vampires, but this is literally every vampire cliche. And also, I feel like they were a little bit of a victim of relying on how beautiful their cast was and the acting that came through. I was kind of yes, they're beautiful, but it got better way after. But you could tell in the pilot how different it is from the rest of the show, and so that's why I'm it's just not a good pilot. They should have just started with episode 2.
So did they tone down the cliches?
They did. Yeah. So the pilot, it one of the big things in the books too is that one of the main characters, Damon, he can churn into a raven, and when he comes, mist and fog come along in the books, and they did that in the pilot, and that was literally it. After that, he never did it again. So it was just wait, what? And I think someone realized how are we going to maintain that going forward? So I think they were let's just cut that. And so there's things like that you're okay, well,
he turned into a raven?
Yes.
Not a bat?
No.
Oh, see, look at breaking cliches. There you go. There's one.
It's a little different, yeah. I think that was
dumb,
just.
But nevertheless,
I think that was just changing, into animals kind of thing. It's my guess is that he can choose it, but it was only done in that episode and it never happened again. So
okay. You've been to the city where they filmed it in Georgia.
I did, yes, Covington, Georgia. I love the series itself. I love the series, and the cast actually, the cast is great and phenomenal. They are beautiful, but over time,
actors.
this series got better. So yeah, it's just that one pilot episode was really quite terrible in my opinion. So
it's a great setup for my second one as well, because my second one's Parks and Rec, and I would actually extend this to the first season and a half, basically until Rob Lowe and Adam Scott show up. But yeah, I adore Parks and Rec. It's one of my favorite television shows ever. But the beginning was rough. And I believe that was also right around the writer's strike. So there was also a lot of stuff going on outside of the show, logistically in Hollywood and everything. I don't know if that had any effect, but it feels like, especially going back, and I usually rewatch the show once a year. But I usually now begin with the episodes where Rob Lowe and Adam Scott show up, because before that, I really get the feeling the characters in the first episode, certainly in the first several episodes, are not who they become, and not who they're known to be and remembered as. And so I really think a lot of that was growing pains in the writing room, particularly of who these people are. And certainly I think that's also going to be informed ultimately by the performance as well. I think the actors themselves added a lot to who those characters ultimately became. But I really think it hit its stride when Rob Lowe and Adam Scott showed up, not necessarily because of them, although I love both of their characters. But I thought by then The writers really knew what the show was, who the other characters were. I thought all the original characters really hit their stride and became who they were ultimately for the rest of the show. And so I'm certainly not alone. Even looking up on the internet, like, oh, worst pilot lists. Parks and Rec is often up there. So certainly not alone in this assessment. But yeah, but it is a reflection that I think, as you just alluded to, the Vampire Diaries, certainly that even though you might have a bad first episode or a couple episodes, you can salvage it. It can be salvaged. We're not necessarily trashing these because these are clearly shows that we ultimately like. So,
yeah. Pilot episodes are the hardest because you're literally trying to establish everything in the first episode
and be interesting in doing it.
And sometimes you only have, like, for some shows it's like 20 minutes. Other shows sometimes have like 45 to an hour. It just like, it's just, you're trying to cram so much in such a tight time frame that it's a challenge. It's hard to do. So, and other restrictions, I'm sure. But
turn to your first one on the list, and we're going to like move through our best list because we are talking for so long, which is not a problem other than attention spans.
Well, so and my first one could be pretty quick because I bundled Parks and Rec with The Office as the top worst pilots because they're basically like the same showrunners, which, The Office wasn't really their fault because the studio kind of forced them to basically mimic the first episode of the UK version of The Office, but still, it was not great in my opinion. And obviously, for all the reasons you just said, Parks and Rec. So I combined them into one. But again, like you said, as the season progressed, I love The Office. I know you're not exactly a fan of it, but I love it. So another example of how a show can, progress and get better.
And so I don't even know if I've seen an entire episode of The Office, so I can't really comment. All I can say is your daughter loves the intro song.
She loves the intro music. She has ever since she was a baby. Like, she would just be playing, and the moment it came on, she would just be like, whoa, like instantly hooked into it and stop what she was doing. She loves the music. Yeah.
So for me, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It's a great point because I agree wholeheartedly. Part of this can also be impacted by our expectations of shows. And what we anticipate. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe we have unreasonable expectations, or what we want the show to be is not what the creators intended to be or want it to be. But nevertheless, I think you're absolutely right. It's a conditioning factor. And so the reason I mentioned that is because that's how I chose the number one on my list, which is the Book of Boba Fett. I came into that show with such high hopes, expectations that this was going to be kind of a gritty crime drama. Or at a minimum, a gritty bounty hunting drama. And I think that was the promise that we were given in that, I think it was a post-credit scene to season 2 of The Mandalorian of Boba Fett sitting down in Jabba's throne. And so those were the expectations I was bringing into the Book of Boba Fett, and completely subverted on every dimension. And so this is also a critique of the whole show, but you can already tell from the pilot, like, oh, this is not going to be what we were promised. Or at least I think we were promised by that post-credit scene. And sure enough, it was in many ways worse than what the pilot episode set up. And then it almost feels like, as many others have commented, that even the creators felt that way. That they got bored with the show, or were concerned with the direction it was going, because we had the side quests of Mando show up in the middle of the show. Luke Skywalker is in the middle of the show. Grogu's back. And then the whole final episode and end sequence was ridiculous on so many
riding the Rancor.
Oh my god. And then what do people call them? The Vespa Gang? Which really hurts me, because one of the members of the Vespa Gang is in one of my favorite shows right now, Yellow Jackets. and so on all these different dimensions. And so I'm including it because the pilot was bad too, I thought. Just what a disappointment the Book of Boba Fett was and continues to be. So yeah, I'll leave it there. That's the top of my awful list, my worst list for pilots. So let's stop the depressing mode here, the depressing atmosphere. Let's build in some optimism. Let's talk about things we really like.
Yes.
So number 3 on your best list. What
best list. Number 3 for me is what I'm wearing. Firefly.
Oh.
Well, it's
is that supposed to be for the show, or is that like
so I'm wearing a t-shirt that has literally the bug, a firefly, and it is wearing Jane's hat from the show. I don't know if you can tell. Yeah. It's wearing, so it's a firefly bug, and he's wearing Jane's hat, which is a character from the show, an iconic like knitted cap, orange and yellow knitted cap. And so that's what my t-shirt is. But yes, Firefly is my number 3, which at the time Firefly was not very well received. However, I blame Fox for that, because the show time that they put him on was like murder. It was like Friday evenings, and like who watched shows on Friday evening anyways? So it only had like a 10 episode run, I believe, if I remember. But one of the greatest shows in my opinion. Joss Whedon and the characters he created was fantastic, and the writing, I just love Firefly, as I know you introduced it to us actually, Joe, and it was brilliant. And I thought the pilot, for such a fantasy out there kind of sci-fi world, I think the thing that stood out the most outside of the world was the characters themselves. And I have never loved characters, I think, more than I have in that show. And it was like the perfect blend of like action, humor. Each character had its own personality and like immediately established what was happening in the world and what they were trying to do. You never loved like a band of misfits more than that show. And so, and I just, for how many episodes they got, and then eventually a movie, which yes, Serenity is amazing. I just thought, they were able to do so much with so little, and I just love it so much. So that's my number 3 on the list. Well,
you mentioned at the outset, world building, and this was worlds building, it's kind of the sci-fi realm. But what they were able to do, it was so unique. Like all the environments were unique, the planets were unique, the communities, the characters certainly. So I can't disagree with you at all. Loved it, and also the intro to Serenity you mentioned. Oh my gosh, so good. One of the best villains in my opinion ever on screen.
Yes,
the operative, I think, was his actual name. Chiwetel Ejiofor. Hopefully I pronounced his name right. Oh, one of the best villains ever. Yes. So this is a little out of the box, I think, because this is not a television show, but I think it functions a similar way. The number 3 on my list is Iron Man, the movie, with Robert Downey Jr. I've heard others talk about and equate, particularly the Marvel phases. I think it's 1 through 3, up through Endgame, the Infinity Saga, which I believe is what Marvel calls it now, as one long form television show. Just in
I could see that.
Form.
Yep.
And from that perspective, I think Iron Man was an incredible entry into it, both as a self-contained story, but also then the tagline at the end with Nick Fury, hinting that this is going to be something larger if it's successful. Certainly the reemergence of Robert Downey Jr. Onto the global stage, I guess, as after his history and everything. And then I just love Jeff Bridges just eating up scenery as the villain. And just like going full camp, fully embracing how kind of absurd his character is. And so I just thought it was a great launching off point for the MCU. And a great pilot for the Infinity Saga, what we got as the Infinity Saga. So even that's a little outside the rules that we don't actually have for this segment. Number 3 on my list, Iron Man.
It's okay. We don't have rules for these kinds of things. But
there are no rules.
Mean, I agree. That was like one of the first, I feel like one of the first superhero movies that was really taken seriously, I guess you could say. It definitely changed the game, in my opinion, in terms of how superhero movies could be approached, because it brought it into the real world almost of how realistic it could be with weaponry and stuff like that. So I thought I loved Iron Man and the characters. Oh my God. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. He literally is Iron Man. He
is
Iron
Man.
Man.
At the end. Yeah,
exactly. He is Iron Man. You can't beat the casting. It was fantastic. So yeah, I agree. That was phenomenal. So
what's number 2 on your list?
My number 2 is going to be one of my all-time favorite shows, Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones.
pilot, which I know they actually reshot the pilot, which thank God they did that.
We never saw the original.
By the sounds of it, you know. But yeah, I would say Game of Thrones, I mean, for all the reasons that we kind of covered, character, establishment, world setting. I mean, I've read the books. I read the books after I watched the first season. But the way, and I know you're reading them now, the way the first book mirrors the season 1 is so phenomenal. The writing's phenomenal. I know even taking lines directly from the book. But I thought they did it so well. And what I love about Game of Thrones, which is very obviously heavily fantasy. I mean, you got dragons in it. Like how dragony how fantasy can you get with dragons? Though. Not in the first episode, but like just the series itself. Yeah, but just the series itself. The way it can hook in just like an average viewer, I guess you could say, as well to that kind of world. I think speaks volume to not only the actors, but the writing and the production of it as well was so well done. So,
yeah, and talk about hook at the end of the first episode. I mean, like,
my God, you're like, whoa,
yeah, and it really sets the tone for the whole, not just that season, but the whole show.
Oh yeah, they pushed a child out of the window.
Yeah,
and they had
after an incestuous relationship. Yeah, I mean.
You're just like, wow, how much can you pack into one episode? Thank God it was on HBO.
Well, outside of, a streaming service, I don't think it could have been on anything else.
Right. So, it was great. Yeah. I loved it. It was great.
So, my second one is Lost. I love Lost. I have grown to love the finale of Lost. I know it's still very controversial, the finale, just I guess as the finale of Game of Thrones is. Ironically.
True.
But Lost just set up a great group of characters, cast of characters, really interesting cast of characters, really fascinating, mysterious locale, a lot of mysteries that were really captivating. And then just the way that I can't remember any other show where they were interspersing flashbacks. And each show was kind of devoted to one character or a couple characters. It was one of the first shows I ever remember of having that kind of storytelling where it was certainly telling you what's going on in the main storyline currently in show terms, as well as also telling the backstory of all these characters through flashbacks. And it was also around the time, I believe, that I saw or had fairly recently seen Lord of the Rings. And so Mary, Dominic Monaghan, was that Monaghan, I think? Was one of the main characters. And so that was also a huge draw for me for the show. But for all those reasons, I Lost, not only one of my favorite shows ever, one of my favorite pilots ever. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Lost
leads
is amazing.
us to number one.
Number one.
Which is good because we're now a little over an hour. So,
yes.
It's good we've reached this point.
Do you want to roll with your number one first?
Sure, I can give you mine. A little out of the box. I don't know. I think it's a little out of the box, given what we've been talking about. For me, it's The West Wing. Another one of my favorite shows ever. Great writing, great characters, wonderful setup, particularly in the first episode. A show that was, as I understand it, kind of the urban legend of the creation of it was really supposed to be focused on the support staff, the administrative staff, the senior staff of the president. So the characters that we really saw for most of that first episode. And that the president was supposed to just kind of pop in, be a supporting character, maybe be a guest character throughout the show. But the way the pilot ends in the introduction of President Bartlett, played by Martin Sheen, was so powerful, so affecting, so captivating that apparently after filming it, the creators, Aaron Sorkin, realized he had to be a main character in the show. And so that ultimately he became a main character alongside the senior staff, who were, as I mentioned, supposed to be the original cast, original focal points. And so can't recommend it highly enough. It's my favorite pilot I've ever seen. Greatest start to a show I've ever seen. So that's my number one on my best pilot list.
Very cool. I've never watched a single episode of The West Wing, so clearly I need to get with it. I know Mom and Dad
have it on box set.
They have the box set, so I should probably.
I think it's on Netflix, maybe HBO Max or Max. I think that's what it's called now. One of those streaming services have it too.
Yeah. But yeah, I need to watch it because you've raved about it. Mom and Jim have raved about it. Our parents, but and a bunch of friends. I need to watch it one day. And Rob Lowe's in it, right?
He is for part of it. He starts
part of it. Yeah, he's not. Yeah, but yeah.
So Rob Lowe's made both these lists, although on the worst list, he was actually kind of indirectly on the best list. But
right. So it's technically, which is kind of funny. So my first number one on my list is going to be Sherlock, which I know for that they had like 2 hours to pump in their first episode, which I feel like
Iron Man, which was like what, a 2 hour movie. So I think it's okay. It's fair.
But also, like, I think that could also be a challenge of filling a 2 hour technically series episode. But the reason why I chose that one is I personally went in not knowing a lot other than the basics of like Sherlock and what Sherlock is, and Watson and everything. I knew the basics. He's a detective. They just, do detective-y things. But yes. but I remember I'm always late to TV shows. I always hear about them, and then it's like 3 years later, and I end up watching it finally.
Yellow Jackets.
Yes, basically. So Sherlock was one that you had watched and our parents had watched and raved about. Oh my God, it's amazing. And so finally I ended up watching it one day. I think it came on Netflix actually. And I ended up finally watching it and I was instantly hooked within like, maybe not even like 5 minutes of the first episode. Like the way they shot it, the cinematography is gorgeous. The way the editors put it together in terms of telling the story and showing the characters. Obviously, the acting. Oh my God, how can you not? I'm kind of a Cumberbatch, so I love me some Benedict.
Wow,
and I love Martin Freeman. Like they're my favorites. And so seeing them together, their dynamic just seems so natural together. It's incredible. And so them bringing the characters to life in kind of a more modern setting too, I think was really cool to see on the screen. And then just the way they approach like the villains, Moriarty. I mispronounced that. I'm terrible with pronunciation, guys. Moriarty.
No, I think it's Moriarty. I think you're saying it right, yeah.
I think I'm saying it right too.
I say it, so I don't know.
Sometimes, I question myself. But oh my God, he was brilliant and phenomenal. And the way they teased him throughout the series, even in the first episode, it just felt so natural and like great. And wow. Yeah. So that first episode, the way they approached it, shot it, edited it, the acting, the writing, oh my God, everything. It was like the culmination of everything you could possibly want in a first episode of anything. It was so great.
And just the way that they updated Sherlock for modern technology, a modern city, it was really a great job of adapting. I don't even know what era the original books took place in. Certainly not our era. But so I don't know the way they updated it. And I was looking him up because I love him as an actor too. I think it's Mark Gatiss, if I'm pronouncing it right. Played Mycroft.
Yes.
Wonderful. And he's even in Game of Thrones. His small part as part of the Bank of Bravos representative is really great. So just wanted to add him to the list of acting that you had mentioned because they were all so well done. They're so well conceptualized, visualized, and also acted. I don't know if those are correct terms, but
oh my gosh,
I cannot disagree with you at all.
And even like when they did the special where they actually flashed back to
that's right.
Yes, like the old like Sherlock days of like flashing back. And I mean, I know that's not the pilot or anything, but kind of spieling on the season itself. But they did that, but he was in like a drug induced like hallucination basically of trying to solve a murder. Like amazing. It was so good. But the first episode was phenomenal, the way they did it. And how they tied everything with it. Like, you literally get to see Sherlock go into his mind palace the first episode. Like, amazing. Like, it's just little things, little details like that they shoved in the first episode that continue throughout the series, I think is just, like, so well done. Bravo. Bravo, Sherlock. Bravo.
Well, with that rave review and that high note, ending our best list there. So that concludes our ranking segment for this week. And we are nearing the end of our inaugural episode of our podcast. And so we just have a couple final things that we want to do because we love books so much. We want to conclude by first telling each other, the audience, the listeners, what we're currently reading. And then Deni is going to end with an indie bookstore recommendation. And we'll conclude it there. So, Deni, do you want to start us off by telling us what you're currently reading?
A Christopher Moore book called You Suck, Vampire Love Story. Apparently, it's book number 2 in his trilogy of this series, which I did not realize. So I'm reading book number 2 first, which seems to keep happening to me with series. But pretty good. I like his humor. I wish I would have read the first book first because clearly established characters that I'm like, I don't know who you are, but okay, I'm going with it. But it's okay. Like stories kind of like meh, but the humor is definitely obviously Christopher Moore's alley. Like he's really good at writing humor. So that's pretty funny.
Between that, the Vampire Diaries, and the reference to the Twilight series, this is becoming a very vampire heavy podcast.
It'll probably be a theme moving forward because I love vampires.
Well, you did say you like the darker corners, shadows of the genres. So
I do. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of dark corners of the genre, I am currently, as you alluded to, I'm in the middle of the second book of A Song of Ice and Fire, reading A Clash of Kings, and I'm really enjoying it. I haven't seen the second season of Game of Thrones in a long time, so it's actually nice to be reading this, even though there are additional characters, certainly some differences between the book and the adaptation, but it was nice to kind of re-enter that world in a different way. And so I'm really enjoying it now about halfway through. But yeah, I'm usually not a big fan of seeing something either on TV or film before reading it. That's why I struggle to get through the Lord of the Rings trilogy because I have the movies. I got to Tom Bombadil and I'm like, what is happening? Anyways, that's a topic for a different episode of the podcast. But I'm not having that problem with Game of Thrones. Moving from the TV show to the books has been wonderful, and the books are great. So with that, Deni, what indie bookstore would you like to promote today?
Sure. So I recently went to Billings, Montana. Random, I know, it was for a family trip. But while I was there, I discovered, and maybe this is because you're in Montana and you're stuck in the house during the winter, but there were like 5 bookstores there within tiny little downtown. And I found one in particular that stood out to me that was called A Few Books More, used bookstore. So everything in it used, no new. But it was huge and just stacks on stacks on stacks of books, like literally boxes of books that you could like sift through. I could have spent hours and hours in there. I wish I would have taken an extra suitcase. And that's where I found like a bunch of old classics. I wanted another suitcase and a lot more time to peruse the shelves because they just had amazing selection of books. I don't know where they get them all, but they had a ton of books. So highly recommend if you ever find yourself in Billings, Montana, to go and check that out. Bring an extra suitcase and go check out A Few Books More because they were phenomenal. Super cool used bookstore. So
awesome. I believe one of the things you bought there was the Dritz Do'Urden first trilogy. Is it called the Homeland trilogy? Or is this the Dritz Do'Urden saga now? I don't know what the current name of it is. But a nice like bounded edition. Of
it was one of the books. Yeah, they combine it all into the first 3, which is pretty cool. I like those kind of collector's edition, I guess you could say.
So if you're in Billings, Montana, bring at least 2 suitcases. Yes. Check out, is it for A Few Books More or A Few Books More?
A Few Books More.
There you go. So there's our indie recommendation for a bookstore. If you're in the area, we're going to be there. So that wraps up our first podcast of the Pod Docs. Before we sign off, Deni, is there any last words that you would like to say?
I think, just look forward to more episodes of us just chatting about all kinds of fandoms, pop culture, things taking place, happening. Just come on, hit that what do the kids say? Hit that smash that like button or subscriber button and just join us and chat with us.
Whatever tool it is to join us, smash that button, smash that link, whatever the case may be.
Yes.
And I just want to echo your sentiments as well, Dane. It was fun chatting today for our first episode. I can't wait for the next episode and all the series of episodes to come. With that, the Pop Docs are signing off. And until next time, the clinic is closed.